The Art Beat, a weekly program putting you in touch with artists and arts events from the J.T. and Margaret Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University. Hello and welcome to this week's Art Beat. I'm your host, Peter Martins from Texas Tech University, and my special guest this week is Professor Kevin Chua, who's an associate professor in the School of Art at Texas Tech. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Peter.
Good to have you here. We're here talking about an exhibit that is currently underway in the School of Art landmark gallery space, focused on the country of Vietnam. Can you tell us about the basics?
So the title of the exhibition is Moving Vietnam, Diasporic Art After Reunification. And it's, just to give you all the dates, it's going on from April the 11th all the way until May the 4th of 2025. The exhibition involves 4 artists, Tiffany Chung, Jun Nguyen Hatsushiba, Phong M. Do, and Bun Nguyen. And it's an attempt to think about mobility and movement in Vietnam. So in the late 1970s, specifically after 1975, the fall of Vietnam, a lot of people in Vietnam were trying to leave the country. At first, it was a little bit of a trickle in 1975. And then from like around 1978, the numbers really started growing. And a lot of these people, because they couldn't flee to neighboring countries such as Cambodia or like Laos, a lot of them were forced to leave via boat over the South China Sea. So many people took to these boats and often in various very precarious conditions. Many of the boats were ramshackle and small. The boats were like often overcrowded. Conditions on these waters weren't good as well. A couple of the boats sank. Many didn't make it to like their destinations. And there were also like pirate attacks on the high seas. So one part of this exhibition focuses on kind of going away from the state narratives and media cliches that have been going on about this Vietnamese exodus, right? And, in the late 1970s, they were known as the boat people. And there were a lot of like very graphic images that were being shown in various kinds of news media. And then states like the Vietnamese state, the American state were giving their own version of events, and they were also like telling particular stories. And the question is like, how do you go beyond these kind of like received narratives? So 2 of the artists in this exhibition deal with like this kind of like leaving or departure. And then the other 2 deal with what does it mean to like return. So that whole part of the exhibition involves after diplomatic relations with Vietnam were normalized after 1995 between the U.S. and Vietnam. A lot of like people in the Vietnamese diaspora started to go back to Vietnam. Some to visit family members. Some for work, some just to like visit and for reasons of like pleasure. But these returns also, they have been talked about in like a certain kind of way, often with a kind of this kind of dream of like a return to Vietnam, and almost like there's a certain utopian dimension to that return as well. So for me, I wanted to get outside of that kind of maybe very positive sense of a return, and and the artists that 2 of the artists in the exhibition kind of like deal with this problem of return. So leaving, return, that kind of sums up what this exhibition is about.
Interesting. So growing up in my own childhood up in Wisconsin, I recall there was actually a pretty sizable community of folks from Laos and I think Vietnam that had been, maybe the term is resettled, I don't know, in you know, in our kind of a smaller communities. And I can say as a young person, I had no idea the backstory, right? I mean, we just didn't really have any context for it. So I guess those are the sorts of stories that we're talking about, right? How they initially had to and were able to leave, and then got to some places. And you don't get much further away from South Vietnam than Kaukauna, Wisconsin, I think is true. Is that where some of these stories are coming from? That folks that have been in the U.S. perhaps for decades that are going back?
Yeah, I mean the Vietnamese people who left, they went to many different parts of the United States. Many of them settling in California. In New York as well. There's a really large community, as you probably know, in Houston, Texas. In Wisconsin, interestingly, there's a sizable community of this group that's called the Hmong. And one in my catalog essay, I do mention that particular group of people. They're not as well known as, let's say, Vietnamese, but and we often also don't talk about like other people from Indochina, for example, the Cambodians, Laotians, as part of like the exodus as well. So yeah, it's interesting, and the exhibition does try to go, maybe not in incredible amount of detail, and there's a limit to how much we can do this, but going into like these narrative stories that have not been told.
Now, is the storytelling here, as you're saying, is it strictly photography? Is it a mixture of media that's in the gallery?
So 3 of them are videos, and 1 of them is a photography series.
Okay. Amongst the 5 artists, I think you said.
4 artists in the exhibition.
All right. And you mentioned that this is, in some sense, a collaboration with a division of the English department here at Texas Tech, the comparative literature program. So how did that collaboration come about?
So they initially were organizing this symposium in relationship to the anniversary of the reunification of Vietnam, which happened in 1975, so 2025. So the Dr. Yuan Shu was putting together the symposium, and we thought we'd collaborate with them and do an art exhibition alongside.
Great. And although it's not related, some of our listeners may be aware of the Vietnam Center at Texas Tech that's most closely associated with the Department of History, and they've also had a pretty significant happening conference, I think, sort of thing this spring for the same reasons, the 50-year mark here. So a lot of activity looking back, I guess, on that chapter of history on campus this spring. So you mentioned the themes of departure and return most broadly, and a couple resonances strike me here that this is a kind of almost a timeless theme throughout world literature. I mean, you think of Homer's Odyssey, right? Like the kind of the ultimate return story that also taps into something you said, which is you can't go back to the same place you left, so to speak, right? So can you talk about that a little more from the standpoint of the artist, the of the problematizing of the return, that it's not a it's not a utopian return. We're not going back and everything is fixed now, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so 2 of the artists in the exhibition, Phong Do and Bun Nguyen, sort of think about through their work this whole notion of like return. Phong, she went back to Vietnam after about 20 years of not being there and having left for a while. And her photographs show this very kind of like complicated, anxious relationship that she was having with her relatives. And she found a way to take photographs that like perfectly capture this kind of like in-between state like where you're there, but then you don't quite like belong, or like you have like certain memories, but yet you still feel like alienated. And Boone does it in his own way, and maybe his kind of like videos are more meandering, and they don't have this kind of tone of nostalgia, which I think is very unique and like interesting. So many, I think, people in like the Vietnamese diaspora, maybe they're looking for something, right, when they go back. But then maybe we, and I'm not Vietnamese, I can't put myself in his shoes, but so many of us like want things, but then we end up not getting them. But there's something maybe about the journey that's like interesting and worth telling.
Yes. And I think maybe especially for Americans, we have maybe an above average propensity to end up in our adult lives in places very distant from where we grew up. For instance, I think our percentage is kind of the highest in the world for that. Not necessarily that we leave the country, but that the country's big enough that we live in a very different part of it. And I think there are those sorts of stories and feelings that go on, maybe with a lot of people in Lubbock, Texas, right, where I know a lot of the folks that I know and myself, we didn't grow up here. We didn't even grow up in Texas. So there is that sense of return and am I remembering things as they actually were, or am I remembering them, through some sort of lens, rose-colored or otherwise? Now, the history the basic history that this whole exhibition is based on, it also reminds me of some things that are a little more current, right? People that had to leave Afghanistan, for instance, or people that had to leave Haiti, still are having to leave Haiti. I suppose it's possible that in whatever kind of round number of years that we could be having these, in one sense, unfortunate retrospectives on those situations as well. Do you see anything that's kind of extrapolatable from the Vietnam situation now that we're 50 years out, that maybe the exhibition captures that could be applicable to current populations that are being displaced for some of the same reasons?
Well, one thing that was interesting when I was doing research for the exhibition was in the 1970s and 80s, it was not just the Vietnamese who were leaving their country. There are a whole number of like other exoduses, if that's a word. So, for example, people leaving, like as you said, Afghanistan. There were a lot of people leaving a lot of Central American countries just as like fallout from like proxy Cold War battles. So I thought that was interesting. How do we see Vietnam as not just this kind of isolated problem, but as part of like a larger, more global kind of like crisis. And also, a lot of these like narratives, like certainly the Vietnam exodus has been told from the point of view of like the state and a lot of like news media. How do we get down to like maybe a more ground level to talk about the experiences of these migrants, right? And what they're feeling, what they're thinking. Often like we don't hear about them. And then, definitely the whole Vietnamese migration issue has immediate resonances with what's going on today. Almost too much. And, as I was like writing my catalog essay, I couldn't help feel kind of like this like weight pressing down on a lot of us right now as immigration restrictions are being kind of like very, very dramatically enforced.
Yeah, normalizing political relations between governmental entities is a very different matter than someone who is displaced or has to leave normalizing relations with the people they've left behind, for instance, and I suppose the people that they're with in their new situation as well. Well, thank you very much for your time here. It's been great to get a little idea of what to expect at the exhibit and the kind of the weighty stories behind it. I'll point out for our listeners that in a couple weeks we'll be talking to another art professor, Dirk Feller, who will talk about the exhibit that will follow this Moving Vietnam exhibit in the Landmark Gallery space on the campus of Texas Tech. But until May 4th, you can still experience the Moving Vietnam exhibit on the campus, and it's free and open to the public.
And again, it's at the School of Art building, and it's also open on the weekends. So if you have some time, come check it out.
All right, great.
Thanks,
Thank you
Peter.
once again, Kevin Chua. Pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks.
The Art Beat, a weekly program putting you in touch with artists and arts events from the J.T. and Margaret Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University.